Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. This meeting is being held at the Fire and Police Shed headquarters at Eastleigh. This meeting also being recorded for broadcast on the authority's website and will be available for repeated viewings. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images and recordings for broadcasting purposes. There is no scheduled fire alarm today. Should the fire alarm go off, I should suggest you follow someone in uniform, that way. Microphones, please. You have them, you know how they work. Turn them off when they're not being used, please. So, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Katie, please.
Just Councillor Stevens, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And welcome to Donna Jones, our Police and Crime Commissioner.
Morning.
Who is here, as always, as our invited guest. Item 2, declarations of interest. Anybody? No? Thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the last authority meeting, 27th of July. Does anybody have any comment on those minutes? Or any matters arising? No? Okay, well, I will sign them as an accurate record. Item 4, deputations. Katie? None? Item 5, Chairman's announcements. I've got a few. On the 9th of August, I travelled to the Isle of Wight together with the Chief to visit some of our fire stations and meet some of the teams there. It was excellent. We had we actually only saw 2 fire stations because we had lots of communication with the people there, and I think it's better to work on the ones you've got rather than sort of having to rush off when the questions get difficult. But it was the alpha and omega of fire stations, I can tell you. Ryde is a perfectly serviceable, nice place, looks good, almost like a hotel. Newport, on the other hand, built in 1960, well, I'd rather not say any more, actually. I mean, for people to work in those conditions is pretty shabby. But things are at hand, you'll be glad to hear. You know, we'll probably be joining up with the police there, that would make sense. There are issues, you know, the site isn't worth much money, but there are issues, and we will conquer them and do things, won't we, Matt? But it definitely needs to be done. And I think the general view of the people there was they were quite happy. Neil, did he?
Thanks, Chairman. And as ever, it was always nice to go over with members to the Isle of Wight, and we'll look to do more of that. As you've mentioned, the Isle of Wight in itself brings new challenges to us as an authority, as a combined authority. And we know that the Council's ability to invest in all of their building stock has been limited over the years. But we will do our best to make sure we balance that off. Our teams over there are motivated. We have our own challenges on call over there as well in some places, just like we do in Hampshire. So it's, in a sense, it's kind of home from home. And the island's staff are fantastic at what they do. They've had a very busy summer. And we've had our own crewing issues over there also. Although Stu and team are working ever so hard to keep that the capability over there up and keep serving the community. So lots of work to do, as ever, with our staffing, but we do want them to feel the difference of this combined authority. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. There was a suggestion from our Vice Chairman that we had an APAG meeting over in the Isle of Wight, which we can look at, can't we? I mean, the admin may be insurmountable, but I think it would be good for us all to go over there, and good for the Isle of Wight to see us going over there. It's all about maintenance of morale. Yes, Roger.
Can I just ask you, Sharon, is that having been over to the Isle of Wight, were there any special issues which they brought up which were unexpected, in the sense that it was different to the Isle of Wight to what we have on the mainland? Were there, I mean, we've only been amalgamated for a very short time, so were there any issues relating to the amalgamation that they felt that we needed to really be taking on board, other than obviously the buildings, which we know about and we have known about all the way through, that we were going to have to deal with that? But were there any other issues?
Well, if you know the Isle of Wight, everything is different on the Isle of Wight. But I don't know. I don't think so. Neil?
Pleasingly, because we've had the partnership for a very long time, the operational partnership for some time, I think we did it all right around, having the operational partnership, but then the governance part follows. I think that works, has worked very well for us. That said, there's still, as there is in every single fire station you can visit, concerns about certain things, and certainly the kind of promotion process, we had a long chat about that in one of the fire stations. As ever, there's always things to resolve, and news travels slowly sometimes in organisations the size of ours. I think the island has its own challenges in getting the information around, but I know our team are very focused on making sure the right information, the managers are well briefed, so that normal management chains can communicate the important good news we've got to share. But that's going to take a while for everyone to see it and not only hear it, but also experience it. And that's something which we're desperate to drive through.
Okay. Just a bit on the firefighter recruitment course, the latest one. We are finalising the whole-time firefighter recruitment plans, which will incorporate our continued commitment to those groups that are unrepresented across the service, and the opportunity to apply for our next recruitment campaign in the new year from the start of 2022. I'd like to welcome on behalf of the authority and the service all new recruits who have just started their course and wish them the best of luck. The service will be running recruitment days to increase the diversity of our workforce, and the first recruitment open day will take place on Saturday the 18th of September here at Eastleigh from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. The recruitment team will also be hosting 7 on-call to whole-time recruitment advice workshops during November for on-call firefighters that want to find out more about becoming a whole-time recruitment process. Neil, anything to add?
I was going to ask Molly perhaps to add a few words, because
Molly.
her team have done a fantastic job in this recruitment round as well. Over to you, Molly.
Thanks. It was a very full update, actually, so thanks for that on behalf of my team. Just to say that we currently have a new recruits course. They've just been in for a week, and we are really continuing to benefit from the positive action that the team and the organisation undertakes. So this is our first course where we have 50% gender balance, and we've seen an increase in our BAME candidates as well coming through. So we're really, really pleased with this intake, and hopefully there'll be opportunities for you to meet them, if not during the course, at the end when they all pass out.
Thank you, Molly. Any questions for Molly? Anybody? Yep.
It's just around the on-call to full-time piece. Given that I suspect we struggle to recruit on-call more than we do full-time firefighters, are we aware of the impact on, on-call if too many of our on-call look to become full-time, and how we're going to address that particular issue?
Yes, and it is the ongoing challenge. So obviously all of our staff are members of society, and we can't stop them applying. But equally, we part of our intake, we always wanted to be transfer from on-call to whole-time, so we could actually genuinely recruit to on-call, saying, come and experience the role here. If you want a full-time career doing it, you've got that option. Doesn't mean you always automatically will. You have to beat other candidates too. It does give us challenges for sure. I know Stu's team has to balance very, very finely. We take the very best in the recruitment process, irrespective of their background. And just because you've been a firefighter before doesn't necessarily mean you'll beat someone who's not been a firefighter, because it's about their strengths and their attitude towards society, as well as their kind of physical capabilities. So it is an important balance we have to manage, and both Molly and Stu work very hard to make sure the cohorts are made up of distinctly different parts. Because equally, if you consume from your own folk, you won't ever create any balances in terms of gender or BME either. So it's very important that we have a mixed kind of economy in that in terms of recruitment process.
Just to add that what we have seen in terms of our on-call to whole-time recruitment is that often benefits our female members of the workforce. They often feel more confident if they've come in through a retained route and then go whole-time. I think we're still battling some of the tests that you have to do to join the whole-time recruitment. Can feel quite daunting when you're doing it on a mass, whereas when you're doing it to join the on-call, it's a kind of one-on-one experience, and so we're seeing that women perform better there where they've got more confidence perhaps. So it's still really beneficial to us to maintain the on-call to whole-time recruitment as an avenue.
And David, as you mentioned numbers, I mean, we have a problem in Bembridge, for instance. Bembridge is a huge holiday site, and the population is pretty peripatetic. And those that are there are fairly old. So A, there's a shortage of the age requirement, but B, more importantly, there's a big lifeboat station there. So all the young ones go to the lifeboats. I'm actually about to talk to someone who I know who runs the lifeboat to see if there's any way you can get a sort of some joint effort. You know, you're knackered if they both go off at the same time, but it may be possible. But you know, there's a difficulty in getting the people.
So my point's not really around stopping people going from one to the other. It's just that awareness that we will lose on-call people to full-time, and we need to make sure we are filling that gap, which we struggle with anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thank you. Next, the government's 3-year spending review. The Chancellor launched a spending review on the 7th of September, which will conclude with the autumn budget on the 27th of October 21. The spending review will set our government spending plans for 3 years, covering the financial years 22-23 and 24-25. This is welcome news for us, as it will provide greater clarity about the medium-term financial position of the authority. The government has announced the core spending power will grow, although the impact on the fire sector as a whole, and us in particular, will not be clear until the budget announcement. We will be providing a response to the government consultation on the spending review, setting out our position. Anything to add? No? Okay. Next, the Hampshire HMIC FRS State of Fire and Rescue Report, the annual assessment of fire and rescue services in England. I'm working with the Chief Fire Officer in preparing a joint submission on behalf of the authority and the service in response to Sir Tom Windsor's, who is the Chief Inspector of Fire and Rescue Services, for his final State of the Fire and Rescue report this year. Due to meeting the submission timelines, which have been quite tight, it will then be shared with authority members for information, and you will get a copy of it by the end of this meeting, having been time. It's good news for us, clearly, because it gives us a huge opportunity to wave the flag again. Within the report, it by definition focuses a lot on the actual service and not so much on the authority. But the point is, if the service is looking absolutely brilliant, then the authority is doing its job. It makes a stonking good read, doesn't it? Any comments, Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. And it is a good read, and it's nice to have lots of good things to write about, of course, and thank you to the team for doing an excellent job in delivering such a great service. But our inspection is not until the new year, probably April time, and so I always like to hold my counsel until such time as the HMI tells us we're stonkingly good, and because that's their choice, I guess. But actually, Tom Windsor's request here is to help inform the kind of position he takes with government and what he thinks need the most attention. And so there will be, by then, 1.5 tranches of inspections done in this round. We won't have been inspected by then. So in a way, we can start to see the early outcomes of some of the inspections of others. I sit on the reference group with the HMIs, so I'll get a bit of insight into what's happening in other services. That's an advantage to us tactically, because we can see where people are falling down. We can give us a chance to make sure we're not in the same boat. But as you'll know, I will never fall in the trap of creating fresh paint for the HMI to look rosy. It is either we're good at something, or we need some more work on something, and we'll work at that slowly and make sure it's the right thing to do, rather than just amend things for the purposes of inspection. So, but it's definitely a kind of a tactical advantage to us this year in the space we play. But the letter you'll get a copy of today does highlight the main issues that we've been talking about for some time, around funding, about long-term planning, around those things. We talked about the pension system, all those sorts of issues, which we know are big issues for us as an authority as well as a service. So they're contained within there to give him an ability to reflect that back to government. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Neil. Okay, item 6, member developments. I have a few things. On the 23rd of July, I attended the graduation process in these rooms for new firefighters, which, those of you who have been to these things, are great occasions. I mean, it really is permission for bottom lip to wobble moments in terms of the pride that these people show in what they've done. Sadly, through COVID, of course, the relations and companions and people were not allowed to be there, so it was slightly negated because of that. But nevertheless, it was still a very good and positive occasion. On the 7th of September, I and the two Davids, who might want to comment later, attended a governance and leadership program run by the LGA, which, I mean, in view of continual professional development, which we should all be involved in, it was worth going to. I mean, I've been, in a past life, I used to run leadership seminars, so it wasn't all new. But nevertheless, you know, you see new people, you hear new things, you get a pretty good idea about what might go on in other fire authorities, which is interesting or spooky, depending on which way you look at it. And you know, it was based largely on this document, which if you haven't seen it, you ought to get it, Leading the Fire Sector, which is a good read. And I personally would recommend that as a bit of continual professional development, that you get the chance to go on it. The next two ones are not good for, and the 30th of September, which is a council meeting, is not good for us, and also the 12th of October, I think most people are going. But these are run by Ian, yes? So I'll have a word with Ian, and if we can somehow collate some sort of dates, if you want to go on it, then we can get him to set us a course, a program for us, if needs be. Would that be useful to you? Well, let's hear what the two Davids said about it, first of all, in a moment. And last week, Derek Mellor and I visited Tadley Fire Station on their training night, which was excellent. It was good fun. The crew seemed to be happy and content. Well, no one's happy and content, but they're on side and on the ball and good, and it was very good. I do hope that we can continue to visit a fire station near you, particularly as we now don't have a specific member responsible for on-call firefighters for the reasons which have been explained. But I do think it is very good for the morale of the firefighters if we do turn up and have a talk with them. So I would like to see in the future, please, at this stage of these meetings, glowing reports of visits to fire stations, if you would. Members, anything been going on in your life? David Harris.
Chairman, if I can pick up your invitation to give some feedback on my experience of the leadership and governance course. I thought it was useful. I thought it was too long. There was a sort of theme that came out insofar as the importance of the whole team and working with the whole team. And sometimes it's a failure of leaders just to sort of concentrate on the objective. If you support the whole team and you invite their best contributions and give them an opportunity, then sometimes as a result of that very process, you get a really good outcome. So I think it was useful, and as you've remarked, just the opportunity to listen to people in other authorities is always good as well. You know, Hampshire, I like to think, is the best in the country, but that may not necessarily be agreed by somebody who lives in Derbyshire, for example. And overall, I think it's useful, and if I get an opportunity to attend further courses, I think I will readily accept. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. John, I know you want to. Can I just ask David to comment on the course specifically?
Thank you, Chairman. I think following on from Councillor Harrison, I think he's hit the nail on the head with a lot of that. I think with any course like this, it's got to be aimed in quite a generic way, and where you've got people that are attending that have come from all sorts of experiences and backgrounds. There are people on there that have not been on authorities before May, some that have been on there for a long time. So you're always going to cover ground that perhaps you've already covered before. But from a situational awareness point of view from other fire authorities and some of the issues that they're facing, and we're also facing coming up, and a chance to make some connections with other people, I think it's always useful to attend. And I don't think anyone that attends any conference or course that doesn't learn something probably isn't paying attention. That doesn't mean the other 90% isn't covering the same ground, but there's always something to be learned. So I think it's always useful to attend, and would encourage other people to make the effort if they can.
Okay, thank you. Becky is, as regards these programs and courses, Becky is going to introduce into our diary system things that come up on courses, because sometimes they come to me and I send you, sometimes they go to Becky and she does, and sometimes they go in the middle and no one sends them out. So it's going to be part of your diary process now, so you can pick and choose as you wish. But you two, we had sort of split into groups and discussed bits, and you were elsewhere, that thing. And one of the people said, and of course the trouble with authorities is that, you know, no one's judging the standard of the people on the authority, and the standard is sometimes pretty low. Well, hang on a minute, I thought, and you know, and not really enough important people there. I did remind him that A, we are 11 rather than 28, or what some of you are, and also that actually on our fire authority we have 2 executive members from the county council. So I said, you know, oh, we're pretty all right, high quality, thank you. Bloody cheek. Halfway through.
You have 3 executive members because you have 1 from the Isle of Wight.
Well, that's true, yes. Any more? Jonathan, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the idea of us all being told in our diaries about these events is a first-class one. Some of us get these LGA events because if you go to LGA meetings, there's so many going on, they tend to come through anyway. But not all of us do that. So to have them basically to be spoon-fed would be jolly helpful. Just after the last full meeting, I did mention that I did actually attend the Prince's Trust events, which were on the 28th and 29th of July, both of them. For those who don't know what the Prince's Trust is, it's basically the fire service offering courses to youngsters who will benefit from doing outward bound activities. And the first one had 9, the second one had 13. They are great events to attend even virtually, because the activities the youngsters get up to, which are overseen by team leaders, is just fantastic. And they do grow and they do improve, and the confidence factor after, I think, is it 8 weeks of hard toil is quite extraordinary. And I do hope that we will continue to do this for as long as we can. I'd like to commend the team leaders, who were Lucy Kirk and Natalie Latham, since we're on air. And I would, even if you I would recommend that as many of us can go to the next set of Prince's Trust activities. If it's done virtually, you can actually, if I can say this again, do other stuff whilst you're sitting and watching it, because you're hearing from the youngsters all the time, and so it's really worthwhile. I'm also visiting Cosham this afternoon, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Councillor Gary Hughes.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. Despite the minutes indicating that I was not in support of the carbon reduction programme at the last meeting, I readily stepped up to the challenge and became the carbon reduction champion for this authority. And as part of that activity, on the 23rd of August, I met with Matt Robertson, Ellie Croft, the Sustainability Officer, and Jason Millard, the Maintenance Manager, to talk through the carbon reduction programme as it affects the fleet and the estate. And I have to say I was very impressed with that briefing. It furthered my interest, and the agreement we have moving forward is they will update me with progress reports as we move forward and the opportunity to meet and discuss as necessary, and I'll report back as and when necessary. But so, as I said, if you can convince me, I'll become an advocate. At the moment, I'm more towards advocate than a terrorist, which is a positive move. And secondly, I'd like to thank Stu Adamson for allowing me to visit Waterlooville Fire Station last Friday afternoon. It's one of those things you drive past and you only notice it if they're doing car wash charity days, unless, of course, there's an engine coming out. Very interesting visit. It ties in very nicely with the carbon reduction programme, because I did ask if you could do one thing in a fire station to reduce your heat loss, and that would be, and it went that it was a chorus come out, the doors, sort the doors out, which I thought was really interesting. But also the other thing about part-time recruitment was very interesting in terms of the geographical constraints and time constraints, particularly in an environment where you're in a town centre, very few people live, very few people work. So that learning experience was very positive. And I did say to Stuart, I'd like to attend one of the training evenings when it's mutually convenient to get an insight into the people that support us locally where I live. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Any more members? Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I did attend the last Fire Commission. as you did, and you've taken all my thunder away from me by sending out a long briefing of what actually happened at that meeting. So I'll say no more about that one. One of the things which, as you know, I've been very concerned about over a number of years is response times going down rather than staying static or improving. And Stu Adamson and myself have had a conversation about that, which hopefully I will get to understand a little bit more of all the background detail behind them that doesn't come out in the reports which we get. And once I get to fully understand that, and it's continuing the discussions with Stu, is that then I'll be able to sort of hopefully be able to say to the authority, well, you know, it is going in the right direction really, because there are extenuating circumstances or whatever the situations are that is actually pulling it down. Because it's not just us that are being pulled down, they're increasing in times nationally right across the country. So it's getting to understand all the criteria behind it.
Okay, thank you. Any more members, or is that it? I am aware that members, through their members' championship formula, are already engaged with officers talking about what their role is, which is excellent. So if we can keep that going. Okay, item 7 then, which is our modern slavery statement, 2021, to be found on page 9 of your pack. And if I can invite Shantha to talk to us about it.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members, Police and Crime Commissioner. So I've got the delight of presenting this report to you all this morning, which outlines the Fire Authority's commitment to preventing modern slavery. It's a very sad fact that it's something that it takes place in the communities that we all serve. And that's something that not just our firefighters, our crews, but also our blue light partners and local partners within local public services will very much be exposed to and be aware of. So it's incredibly alive, very sadly. The report details some of the ways that it can and does manifest itself. And for us as a fire and rescue service, not only is that something tragic that's taking place within our communities, but also results within safeguarding potentially increased fire risk and other emergencies that we would attend. The statement and within the appendix outlines how we will make sure that we're taking all actions that we can as an organisation to prevent it taking place within our organisation, in any services that we procure, and within our supply chain. And it also outlines for our people what it is, what modern slavery is, how to identify it, and makes clear in a public statement what isn't acceptable. In terms of the resource requirement, you'll note within the cover report that there is nothing that additional, because the awareness of this, the practices are already woven into our policies, practice and guidance, whether that's safeguarding training, how people are onboarded within the organisation, HR recruitment, and obviously within our procurement. And it would be our intention, subject to the Fire Authority approving this statement and it being published externally, that internally we communicate that within our organisation, and also consider perhaps from an assurance perspective, which obviously I look after the assurance programme, is perhaps consider we might want to have some kind of audit on that in the near future. And I think that that's all I'll sort of I'll close with that, and obviously happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shantha. Members, any questions? David.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report. A couple of quick questions. One is first just a procedural piece. We've got EU status exploitation as a point in there, and I appreciate this is background, but is that still relevant going forward, given the changes? So I just wondered to that. And then my other point was around, I appreciate this is a statement rather than a plan, but in pulling all of this together, has there been anything drawn out that we could do better going forward? And have there been any conversations with our colleagues at the constabulary, given that their expertise in, I imagine, dealing with this, around anything we could do to make this better? I appreciate we might pull up some of that in the audit later on, but I just wonder whether anything had come out in the process of putting this together.
Thank you for those questions. So I'll get back to you on the EU one. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that specific one. But in terms of kind of that wider collaboration with constabulary and other partners, that's something that's absolutely ongoing. I mean, it's probably worth drawing the fire authority's attention to some years ago, probably within the last 3-4 years. I say that because I was directly involved. There was a national pilot working with the border force in terms of identifying, the chief's nodding, he recollects that as well, which is good, identifying where modern slavery is taking place, and working fire and border force working together to basically to help each other and help those people, and specifically with regards to fire safety. So that's something that's sort of been long and ongoing. Probably an opportunity for us now to relook at that and to look more broadly with the police as well as to what is taking place. There's probably a general answer, but the foundations sort of have been laid.
Okay, and Donna, our Police and Crime Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to place on record my thanks to the Deputy Chief Fire Officer for this report, which is incredibly important. And we hear the words modern-day slavery banded around quite often, but actually in Hampshire Constabulary, we have probably 2 to 3 cases a month that we become aware of across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, which is deeply distressing. And as the report says, they are increasing as well year on year. Often, the Constabulary are not the first agency that come across these vulnerable, exploited people. It will be South Coast Ambulance, it will be the fire first responders, or indeed fire officers if they're going to call out. And it's through other partners and agencies, A&E doctors and nurses, for example, that we become aware of people that are very sick, that are taken into hospital that we didn't even know were in the country, and or sometimes a neighbour or things like that. So often the police are not the first agency at all. We only know because of the eyes and ears of other people that we work with, other professional services. And so I think this, the importance of this report and the ongoing training to your staff and volunteers is incredibly important for us.
Okay, thank you, Donna. David.
Yes, it's horrifying to think that within the communities we represent, this sort of exploitation is going on and continues to go on unless it's flagged up by somebody. And I always am a great believer in never losing an opportunity to call on the public to assist us. So the fact that we're adopting this policy today, maybe it gives us an opportunity to give some publicity to it. And just a reminder that a lot of these things are exposed as a result of whether it's members of staff or members of the public expressing their concerns to the agencies. So I just wonder whether we might, in addition to adopting the policy, accompany it with a press release and maybe giving 1 or 2 examples of exploitation that has been uncovered and asking people to look out for it and not be hesitant in reporting it.
Can we fix that?
Thank you. I think it's a sort of recommendation. Obviously, Stu and team will operationalise your policies. That's what we do. And there's some great examples across the country of safe havens and opportunities for people who feel they may be either victims or know about modern slavery to come to a place that they can report without fear of incriminations. And so it's a kind of third party. I think the fire service brand is well known for being a safe place to go to. So that's the sort of thing we may be able to do. And obviously we work with our colleagues in constabulary to find a sensible way of doing it, and indeed local authorities also. So we'll thank you. It's a helpful suggestion.
Thank you, Neil. You want to come in on a point from...
I totally agree with the idea of a press release. I wrote that down just before it was mentioned, so I just want you to know that I thought of it first, okay? Right. We work well together, Chairman. And I think more press releases the better when we've got important information to get out, especially good news, as many as possible. Let's tell the people what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Chair. I was very pleased to read in the introductory statement that the Fire Service is part of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Modern Slavery Partnership. I think that's really important moving forward. The observation I did make is that in reading the report, it said there's no impact assessment, but I notice in the Constitution you have, you talk about expectations of suppliers, and you have contract standing orders where you talk about the suitability of contractors. Perhaps you may want to consider within the Constitution updating that bit to reflect the fact that you're talking about their probity and their honesty and their accountancy, etc. Maybe their commitment to addressing modern slavery. That's my observation, Chairman.
Shantha, do you want to come back on that? No, probably not.
No,
Sorry,
but
bit of a
if
hospital pass, I'm sorry.
no, but not on that one. But the question that Councillor Fuller asked, I can come back on because I said I didn't know about the EU status. Yep. So, if I may, that absolutely that is relevant because we still may have suppliers from the EU. So that would be the answer. So.
I'm very happy to send an email, Chair.
Okay. So would Shantha be, I think. Okay, thank you. Derek, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the statement, Shantha. It's excellent. The only issue I'd like to raise is this, what we call third-party slavery. Are we covered in terms of who we deal with, subcontractors, etc., as to whether they have a similar attitude to modern slavery?
So, yeah, so within our supply chains and obviously our procedures with respect to procurement, that would be on us to make sure that we gain that assurance from them.
Okay, thank you. Jason, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I don't think any of us will disagree with the recommendations and in supporting what we've got before us, but it's a kind of curiosity thing really that's come out through what I've read in the report, and maybe I'm a bit too nitpicky, and whether there's a degree of depth that we need to go into, but just as a curiosity question really, there's a mention of how many cases are written by 5,059, the Police and Crime Commissioners touched on there are 2 or 3 per month that the police are becoming aware of within Hampshire. 24 to 36, that would be a year for us. Out of 5,059 seems to be a drop in the ocean. Obviously, any one case is too many, but it would be useful perhaps to know regional figures, how we compare with the rest of the UK. We seem to have not as much of a problem as perhaps in some other areas based on those figures, but just is there any more information that we can perhaps have? The last figures go up in the report to March 2019, so presumably COVID has impacted on that, but we're sort of 2.5 years on from that now, so maybe some more information at some point.
So what this really points to as well is with the Fire Authority's safety plan and communities and our priority around communities and understanding the needs of our communities and their sort of different characteristics. And I think it does highlight a need that actually we need to consider this within our reporting if it's a very live issue within the communities that we serve. So that would be something we could look at for the future.
Okay. Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. Just to pick up on the issues that were raised around supply chains and procurement, I think it's a very good point that we should review contract standing orders to make sure our approach in practice meets what we're setting out in the statement. Now, I believe it does because I think it's been a fairly standard part of our procurement processes for some time to require suppliers to provide evidence of how they mitigate against modern slavery impacts. But I think we should probably review that and make sure everything is joined up if this is adopted.
I agree.
Okay. Roger.
Thank you. Is that within the document here, and which I fully agree with, I think it's an important document which we must all agree and sign up to. It talks about staff training, but it also then talks about members, and members are expected to the highest standards, etc., but no training. Should we not have either at a fire authority meeting just a short presentation or training on this particular, so what we should be doing and what is expected of us? because it says that the code set out the standards expected of members when representing the authority. Now, I think we all know, but I think there should be some training. If we're going to train the staff, then we ought to have some training as well.
Good point. I see it could do no harm. Yep, we will arrange that, thank you. Good. Any more members on this? Okay, if I can invite you to turn to page 12, where the recommendation is, which is that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority Modern Slavery Statement 2021 at Appendix A be approved by the full authority and is subsequently published on the authority website. Agreed?
Chairman, before you move on from and take that as a vote, one of the things which we do here as an authority, we approve a number of documents like this, but they don't necessarily get reviewed periodically. At least I don't think they do, and we don't see them coming back. Should we add to that that this should be kept under review all the time, because the whole of law is going to change in this particular issue, I'm sure, and therefore needs to be kept under review, because we need to be on top of this one completely. So could we have some words added in there, but it's kept under review?
Well, is that something which might be covered by the governance champions? Well, that would seem to be a logical home for it.
So thank you. I think it's an excellent suggestion. But I would, I suppose, look to reassure, part of our role, my role, and the monitoring officer's role, is to make sure that periodically we are reviewing all of the service, and indeed authority policies. And obviously when law changes or the updates made, and Paul is the master of this actually in the team, so looking at how it affects your current policy positions. And so this, in a way, is adopting a policy position which is compliant with the law, and indeed brings about certain policy outcomes which are described in the paper. And as those things change, we will keep an eye on those things and bring them back at times of need. Obviously, you can call for a review at any stage if you feel the need to, and happy for the suggestion around the governance champion to help that in that sort of rigour. I would rather they looked at the process we use to make sure your policies are reviewed, rather than remembering which policies to review, because that's really where we are in our machinery, if you like. So I welcome the contribution, and just to reassure you, though, that process does exist, and we work hard to make sure that they're reviewed systematically.
So, happy? Jonathan?
I think it's probably now been covered. I can see where Councillor Price is coming from, which is laudable, but we could add that amendment to almost every decision we make as a board, and therefore it means that we just go on amending as we go through life. I think it certainly should be taken on by champions, I think perhaps even the progress champion should take that on as well, just to make sure that we're progressing in that, etc., etc. As long as the champions are doing a good job and they're proactive, everything should be included.
Okay, thank you. So just to recap, we are agreed on the recommendation on page 12. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, which is appointments report and update to our constitution, found on page 23. And if I can ask Paul to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, the report at item 8 does two things. It invites the authority to appoint Catherine Edgecombe as the authority's Chief Financial Officer with effect from 1st March 2022, and that follows on from Rob Carr's promotion within the County Council. And then it also picks up some minor changes to the Constitution, partly to deal with member champions, which is something we discussed at the last meeting, and then to pick up a couple of other things, including the modern slavery statement piece. So in terms of the appointment of the Chief Financial Officer, the authority's constitution has a requirement for the authority to appoint to positions, including the Chief Financial Officer, to act as a proper officer and to deal with the functions that are set out in financial regulations in particular, but also relevant local government legislation. You'll probably all remember that at the meeting in the meeting in February this year, Rob Carr was appointed to be the Chief Financial Officer of the new Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority, and Rob and his team had delivered that function to the Fire Authority for a number of years under the shared services partnership with the county and the constabulary. So that function is delivered on a shared services basis across the three partners. So as a result of the recent appointment of the new chief executive at the county council, Rob now has a new role in the county council, and so will not be able to undertake the chief financial officer role going forwards. And following discussions with the chairman and the chief fire officer, it's proposed that Catherine Edgecombe is appointed to take over as the chief financial officer from 1st March 2022. And Catherine's worked with Rob for many years, so is fully familiar with the Fire Authority's finances and has the relevant expertise and qualifications. And the proposal is that that arrangement would continue to be delivered under the shared services partnership in a similar way to the current arrangement. We've put in there as well that as part of that arrangement, the Chief Financial Officer may appoint a deputy, and that, I think, in practice is what has happened for some time. So it's obviously important for resilience and to ensure that we've always got someone to cover that role as required. So that would be down to the Chief Financial Officer to appoint their deputy. So that deals with that aspect. Then in terms of the Constitution, we've made some suggested amendments to deal with the member champion roles. And as set out in the paper, we've just covered what broadly those roles are and emphasise the fact that these are not executive roles where the member who may be a champion from time to time would have any executive functions or be able to make decisions on behalf of the authority. But I think what they do allow is for members to get much greater and deeper involvement in certain areas of the authority's business, act as a sounding board for officers and be a bit of a bridge, I think, between officers and the authority. So when matters come back to the authority for decision, members are able to make much more informed decisions. So what we've proposed to sort of deal with this constitutionally is that there's a delegation to the chief fire officer to agree from time to time which members will do which member champion role in consultation with the chairman, and that way we can keep it pretty flexible and fluid, and members can do different member champion roles from time to time as required by the business that's coming up. We've then included a further minor amendment just to pick up one of the authority's key statutory responsibilities that wasn't actually referenced in the Constitution originally. Now, it is something that the authority has done as largely business as usual from an operational point of view. So it's not something we've not been doing. It's just something that wasn't referenced in the Constitution. So to tidy that up, we've included a reference to the Civil Contingencies Act, which is really where our responsibilities to respond to other civil emergencies lies, and COVID is a good example where that legislation required us to do various things as required by government. So that's really just to tidy up and make sure the Constitution reflects what we are actually required to do. And then finally, we've added a suggested amendment to the authority's terms of reference just to pick up the modern slavery statement from the last report, and that really just puts within the authority's remit the requirement to approve that statement annually. I think it's important, I think, to set this out in the Constitution, because if it's not something that's reserved to the authority or a committee, the scheme of delegation would assume then it's delegated to the chief fire officer. But I think this is something that's sufficiently significant and important that it warrants the authority's attention each year. So we've put that in the Constitution as something that's reserved to the full authority. So that, I think, covers the key things that we are doing in this report and changing in the Constitution, and the recommendations hopefully just reflect what I've just said. So I think that's all I need to say, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Roger.
Thank you. is that I fully agree with the contents of the report. As far as I'm concerned, there's one thing missing, and it's an issue which I've been raising for a while now, and that is that we have deputies for members on committees. And I don't think there's been any disagreement between us on this, and it just seems to be drifting away. It doesn't seem to be coming back. And I do think that this report really should have contained that item, and I do really press that we do have, and we do agree, that we do have deputies for members where there's only one member on a committee. It is, and if they can't attend, they should be able to have a deputy. And so I think that should be changed in the Constitution.
Okay. And how do you see that working? I mean, there's no point in us getting a deputy in from Hampshire County Council who knows absolutely nothing about us.
No, I think that's within our own grouping, is that, for instance, if I take my own group here, there is only the three of us, where we only have one member, entitled to one member on a committee. If that person can't attend, then nobody else can attend and vote. So we should be able to have a deputy. And it's exactly the same with your group, is that you have more, but if somebody can't attend, then it should be another member of your group who should be able to deputise for them. So we have the full complement of members at every committee, because with only 11 of us, our committees are small. So I think that you really need a full complement there of the relevant numbers, so that you can get a full discussion going on and ideas coming forward.
Okay. Yeah, no. So, Paul, how do we put that into writing?
Well, I think, firstly, apologies to Councillor Price from me, because I think it's probably my fault that this has slipped off the radar slightly, because we did discuss it, and I think we were intending to bring something forward to an APAG meeting for a discussion and then to get a steer as to what we would bring back to the authority. I think what would be required, we'd need to just do a little bit of work just to work through the proportionality requirements and the political groups to determine, you know, how many deputies effectively we would need, and we'd also need to consider whether we've got any groups of one, which we may well have with our Isle of Wight members. So subject to that, though, I mean, one way forward may be for us to put this on the agenda of the next APAG meeting, work through those issues before that, and then hopefully then it can come back to the December meeting for the appropriate appointment of deputies.
Okay, so Rod, next APAG meeting? Happy?
Yes, I'm happy with that, but we've said that before, but we need to make sure it happens.
I promise.
Yes, I think if it doesn't happen this time, you can
you can get
shoot
really
me.
David?
Chairman, I love the phrase proper officer. I wonder whether we've got any improper officers within the authority. Not looking at anyone particularly here. It's a question about the member's champion role. It doesn't say so in the paper, but it was my expectation that if we take on this role, that we do it for the 4-year term, rather than sort of swap around more regularly than that. I just wonder whether my understanding of it is the same as other members, and whether perhaps we should be explicit about it. Sometimes I think if you take on a role, you're not terribly proficient until after about a year or so, and then you become more familiar with your subject. So I just wonder what you and others may think, Chairman.
I think ideally, yes, a longer term for me would make sense. I guess always having the ability between us to say, is this working out? And is it working as we anticipated? I'd always want that polite conversation between us. So embedding it within a document like this might be more trouble than it's worth. But I think with the intent of saying, let's have a long-term relationship with the directors, the officer involved and the member, that makes sense. But we just need the opportunity of saying, well, where is it working, where is it not, where can we make it even better, rather than where is it not working completely. Let's think of a positive stance. That could be even better.
Jonathan?
On that last point, I totally agree with the feeling that once you become a champion, you should stay in it for the 4 years. Now, I've just had my first performance champion discussion with Shantha, And it's what is helpful to me is that I spent the previous 4 years doing risk, and risk forms part of the new portfolio, if I can use that word, the new responsibility. It's going to take some time to pick up all the stuff that performance is involved in. And what you don't want is to be taken out of it halfway through when you're actually beginning to get quite good at it. Because it will take time to really work out where we should be looking. One of the, what is interesting, one of the responsibilities of the champion I see is that they will get, hopefully, a look at reports coming through to them, any meetings that we take place in. And if they do that, and they read between the lines, they can help the committee, the rest of the committee, actually focus on the areas that he or she thinks should be focused on, which would be very helpful to conversations. So when you have a sort of 30 or 40-page report, which we may have read, let's say, skimmed through and read the summary, okay, then the champion, who hopefully will have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, can help the committee really get to grips with what's important in that report.
Okay.
And with regard to deputies, there's so few of us, even in the political parties, I suggest that all of us remain deputies and see if we're available if the principal person can't make it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm quite happy to be a deputy, whatever, for whoever. I love everybody.
Now I'm worried.
David.
It was just around the members' champions thing. I sort of read it in a more positive spin, perhaps, than you, Councillor Harrison, in that I thought it allowed us flexibility so that if a particular issue arose that we wanted to appoint a members' champion around, that may be a time-specific piece, we could have a new members' champion or someone's a double hat to do it on X. And whilst you may be convinced you're going to be on here for 4 years, the people of Southampton may decide I'm not. So we have to be alive to change these things.
Okay. Members, anything else before we go? Before we go to the recommendation, this would be a good moment to say a huge thanks to Rob. There may be a bottle of sherry coming your way, I don't know. But a huge thanks to Rob, who's done this for, what, 9 years or something? 10? Huge. Round of applause, I think, for Rob. Extraordinarily good effort. And before we congratulate Catherine, we better read out the recommendations, I think, which are on page 27. Which are that this authority appoints Catherine Edgecombe as its Chief Financial Officer with effect from the 1st of March 22. And do bear in mind, Rob is keeping a watching eye on what goes on. I think. Secondly, that the authority delegates authority to the Chief Financial Officer to appoint a Deputy Chief Financial Officer from within the Shared Services Finance team. That the authority delegates authority to the Chief Fire Officer to agree from time to time in consultation with the Chairman for individual members to act as members' champions in respect of specific matters, and that the authority approves the minor changes to the Constitution set out in Appendix 1. Do we agree? Agreed. Right. Good. Thank you.
Chairman, can I congratulate Catherine on being selected?
Yes. Now is the time. Well done, Catherine. I mean, you don't. The chief and I have not interviewed. We have talked at length to Catherine, and it just seems the most obvious thing to do. So well done, Catherine. Item 9, then, minutes of the Standards and Governance Committee meeting. Do you wish to comment, members, on these minutes? Does the chairman wish to comment?
No, Chairman, I'd just like to present them.
Oh, you have to present them. All right. Good plan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to present the minutes of the meeting of the Standards and Governance Committee, which held on the 28th of July, 2021. Happy to take questions.
Any comments, members? Jason.
I sound slightly pedantic here, but that's the third date for the meeting. So we've got the 27th listed, the 26th, and Liz just said the 28th. So I wonder.
It was a long meeting.
Sure. Ah, it's the 26th.
It was a very long meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apart from that, are we? Are we agreed, members? Okay, thank you. Item 10 then is the open minutes of the Stakeholder Committee meeting from the 29th of July. Roger?
Thank you. I'll just formally present these minutes and obviously prepared to answer any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
Any questions, members? No? So we're happy with those? Okay, thank you. Now, we move to item 11, which excludes members of the public and everyone else. But Donna, you're welcome to stay if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Sorry? Okay. Let me take comms. Can you turn off the slideshow, please? And let me know when it is. Thank you.
I formally propose the resolution, Mr. Chairman. So I formally propose it, because we need to formally propose the results.